podcast roll. Welcome in.
You're listening to an Imperfect Leader, the Superintendent and Leadership Podcast. Hello, Jamie.
Hello, Peter.
I'm wearing my Islanders hat since baseball is now over. I'm just going to move over to hockey.
Good for you. Well, I'm wearing my candlestick sweatshirt.
Oh, nice. Oh, the stick. I like that.
That's where I grew up going to baseball.
Very cool. Baseball's dead to me until February.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Just spent a few days in the East Coast, and that was very nice. Visiting some old friends. Leaves were changing. I realized that I don't do well if I'm not driving the car. I hope that's not a metaphor for anything else. I'm like, you're over on this. What are you doing? My poor friend Linus.
A fun person to be in the
terrible.
car with.
I couldn't have been less fun. And I would like point with my hands. Linus cut it out.
It's too
terrible.
on top of it. Golly, the more I know you, the more you become Larry David.
All right.
Let's talk about Camas.
We're talking about John Anzalone, right?
Yes, John Anzalone and the Camas School District in Washington.
That's right.
Where exactly is this district? You
It's
said
right
it's
on the
border.
border of Oregon. It's on the other side of the Columbia River.
Okay, nice.
So I imagine it's very close to
where I'm at currently.
To where you are currently. Yeah.
That's awesome. He was really great. I really enjoyed him.
Yeah, I felt like
listening to him.
for a couple of weeks we've had education adjacent leaders, and that's been really interesting to think about our role in leadership and how those who are adjacent, who have maybe walked in the shoes of school leaders, but are now doing something different, how that can be helpful. And now 2 weeks in a row, we're talking to superintendents who either have just retired or they are currently in the work, and they're doing really interesting things. And John Anzalone is no different. I mean, I really enjoyed his very student-centered focus.
You want to talk about that?
Talking about, his North Star kind of stuff. So we'll get into that.
Interesting.
I thought we could talk about he's so open to learning from mistakes, being open to that. And so I found that refreshing and really inspiring. And then certainly, boy, how important those internal relationships are within the system.
I wrote a few questions down that I think are really kind of interesting related to what he shared. And as everybody who's listened to me on this podcast and Peter fully knows, is that vulnerable leadership or humble leadership is my jam. And that's,
Sure is.
He is a great model of that, of someone who's trying to just say, I don't know, let's figure that out.
Yep.
Love
I
it.
like that. So why don't we get into it? You're listening to an Imperfect Leader, the Superintendent and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepleman.
And I'm Jamie Almanzán.
And we will see you on the other side. Today on An Imperfect Leader, our guest is Dr. John Anzalone, Superintendent of the Camas School District in Washington State, right on the border of Oregon on the other side of the Columbia River. John brings a rich perspective on leadership, on equity, and on public education. John, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Peter.
I am really just thrilled to have you. And it's really an honor to meet you. As I prepare for these conversations, I'm always looking for examples of what maybe leaders wrote or what they said. And I went to your district's website and I found your State of the Schools speech, and I found it incredibly interesting. You had to really weave inspiration with this level of pragmatism.
Right.
That is hard to do. And in the speech, you talked about having a clear moral focus. You called it your true north, and you described the district's profile of a graduate really as your North Star. And you also at that time emphasized that, budget decisions should always come down to what's best for kids. So I think that'll be my first question, if that's all right, is what is it about that student-centered belief that really serves as your ultimate moral compass? And I guess, how does it guide your decisions when you're faced with these tough trade-offs, advocating for your district while having to deal with these really tough financial times?
Yeah, absolutely. So
just an easy, softball question.
I think being a former soup, that it could be easy to say that kids first, right? And that, but I really feel that upon coming here to Camas, there is a true belief and value in that. And it wasn't always the case in my previous district, maybe because of the magnitude of the size of it. But I really felt coming to a smaller district, a small town, there truly is that value. So when we built the strategic plan and looked at the profile of a graduate, it was really important for us to lean into the business community, the local colleges, universities, trade schools, students, parents, and the 5 characteristics that came out of that and where we built that profile of a graduate, that is our North Star, because those are the characteristics that our entire community is saying, this is what we want to see in one of your graduates. The hard part has been, one of the challenges has been to embed that into the pre-K, K, primary, elementary level, because the teachers and the educators in elementary don't always look that far forward. So really trying to embed the profile of a graduate into everything we do, because this is ultimately what we want to see in a graduate. And how we've done that is really impressing upon our teachers to add that to their daily language. What is it to be an effective communicator? We have kids that will text each other in the lunchroom at the same table. And we're hearing that from our business community when they're hiring and interviewing our graduates. Listen, we love your kids. They're smart as a whip. They're ready. They're responsible, but they're struggling in the face-to-face interview. They're struggling to work on projects together. And so again, that's just one example of trying to embed it into our younger kids, and
Totally.
even changing our report card language and our progress report language to consistently really thread that needle in these characteristics, so it becomes part of the daily vocabulary. And so that's what helps me, Peter, stay really positive, is knowing that we have a North Star, that we have this strategic plan. It's not sitting up on a shelf. It's this living, breathing document where we actually, and you'll see this in the strategic plan, is we have work groups that are working on the different goals and the different aspects of the plan. So it really is a living document. That's what keeps me going, because these budget reductions and this financial outlook is so challenging sometimes. But knowing that we have something as tangible that is keeping us on the pathway, so that when we do make these reductions, we have something. Now, when I did the reductions 2 years ago, we didn't have our strategic plan ready yet. And I will tell you, admittedly, we made some probably arbitrary decisions, just kind of, threw it up in the air and made the best decision we could.
Start making this sort of easy. Oh, this person's retiring, so I guess we can end that program or that class or that course, or those types of things. Like relying on attrition as opposed to sort of saying what's best. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
would impress upon any superintendent to get that plan done and get yourself focused, so that way when you have these challenges, as you know, we have something to ground us.
Yeah. So, because you then get to go back to that plan. Where in the plan do we see this, where people are fighting for maintaining whatever it might be, your robotics team? Okay.
It makes it hard for people to argue the decisions.
Yeah. One of the things you noted about pre-K and early elementary and even 4th and 5th grade teachers who may not have embraced or at least understand their role or their place in that portrait of a graduate. There was a district I was talking to, and they do the annual, the graduates from that high school will walk through the halls of the elementary school and all the elementary kids clap for them. And I'm like, oh, that's very sweet. They're like, yeah, but we take it one step further, where we have key graduates come and talk to grade level teams about where they're going, what they're doing, and why it's important. And then the administrator or the lead teacher on that team sort of asks some prompts of, all right, so what does that mean for us? What are the things that we need to be doing in our elementary school classrooms that can help kids as they get to the high school? So they see the connection. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty.
We do something similar here. We do senior exit interviews, and
cool.
I will tell you, that is probably one of the most memorable days or a few days of the year. And cabinet members who rarely visit schools, whether it's our finance or our HR, they're clamoring to be a part of that, because the kids are real, right? The kids will tell you straight out, hey, this is the good, the bad, and the ugly about the Camas School District, about my school, about my teachers, whatever it is. And we learn so much from that. And one of the components we always try to add is, okay, what are we going to do with that information? Because the kids want to know. They're like, hey, listen, I'm graduating, but if I'm going to sit and give you an hour of my time, I'd like to know, how are you going to improve on this? And so we're trying to work on that feedback.
I love it. Yeah.
Similar to what you're talking about, hearing the voice of the kids. And one of the things I'd probably like to do is start to do those more often instead of waiting all the way till May or June. We can probably do those throughout the year.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's great. We always had this mantra of our operations make our mission possible. And you have operationalized that. You put them in positions to actually have conversations with kids and honor their voice. If you're just joining us on An Imperfect Leader, our guest today is John Anzalone, Superintendent of the Camas School District in Camas, Washington. In the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's this dimension, leaders learning work. And it's really the mind of the work that we do. And inside that dimension is the term harvesting the collective wisdom. It's like involving and honoring of voices. And we've just touched on that a little bit about how do you honor and value the voices of students who can then influence the decision makers of the district. You've talked about how important it is to involve parents, educators, community members as you were developing the Portrait of a Graduate. And you can do that through town halls and surveys and co-led work groups. And I think that really aligns this idea of tapping into the collective wisdom of one system. So I wonder if you could just share a little bit more about why that kind of engagement really matters to you, how listening to this range of voices really helps to shape your decision-making. I think one of the perils that leaders fall into is they fall victim to the impulse to make a quick decision. And It really sounds like you're very reflective. And, what are ways that you do that? And how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so it's in a smaller district that LA Camas, I guess it's mid-size in some respects. It's so important to get ahead of things, right? And so going through these budget reductions, you're never going to make everyone happy. You know as well as I do. And what I try to do is do as much face-to-face, in-person meetings, whether it's one-on-one, 5-on-1, 200-on-1, with my team and my board, of course. And it makes such a difference because between social media, word of mouth, disruptors, all those things, you can find yourself in such a deep hole fast if you don't get ahead of things. So good example is last night, for example, we're going through these reductions, pretty deep reductions, and this word got out through our community that we were just chopping music programs left and right. Realistically, it was a very minor 1 FTE out of the 37 teacher FTEs that we're looking to reduce. But because it's music, it's arts, there's an empathy there. And there's a concern around a small town potentially just dissolving music. And that wasn't at all the case. But I needed to get in front of people because the emails, the messaging, it just wasn't sufficing, right? So I gathered this, I put together this evening where people can come in and I would be the sole speaker. My team would be there in support. And my team was like, John, you're out of your mind. This is going to go haywire. This is bad. So if we take pre-questions and then leave a little bit of time for real-time questions, I think we can make this work. But the superintendent has to be ready to take some hits, to answer the tough questions, but to also be humble and listen. And so there was one lady, and by the way, it went really well last night. I was kind of dreading it all week, but it went really well. And I feel like it really dropped the heat and the temperature around this music stuff. And we answered a slew of other questions too. So this one mom who also substitutes in the district, she raised her hand and she said, I have a question. I have a type 1 diabetic son. And I heard you say that you're reducing the hours of our health room assistants, 30 minutes on the front end of the day, 30 minutes on the end. And I said, yes, that's true. You heard it right. And she made a really compelling argument around, who's going to fill that void? If the nurse is busy or the principal can't get to it, who is going to be skilled and trained to do this and make sure that my son survives? And I sat there and I said, amazing question. And I don't have an answer for that. And not only will I get back to you on that, but I will now prioritize those hours as a potential add back. And she sat there and I think she was waiting for like a defensive answer.
Yeah. Or like a politician's response.
Yeah.
Of, everybody's making sacrifices. And,
yes.
And I totally hear what you're saying. And thanks so much, next question kind of thing. And
really,
it really looks like
when she didn't get that, she sat back in this more relaxed tenor. And I had a lot of feedback on that. I said, John, that was really good that you were able to the title of your podcast to show, hey, this is not perfect. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to, but we are going to make sure that we make that a priority. And I felt that really helped with the rest of the evening. So
yeah, that's a
why
great
I think it's
example.
important, that face to face.
I will tell you, I referenced this dimension of leaders learning work. Within that also is serving as a lead learner. And that has two frames in my mind. One is that you don't send people to trainings that you're not willing to go do yourself, because we're all doing this work together. And more importantly, though, it's really about leading with vulnerability. And that's what you did in that moment, was that you didn't ask anyone else to lead that work. You could have had someone else sort of facilitate, oh, my finance director is going to talk about budgets. No, that's really your role, because you're the instructional and community leader. And then also you demonstrated vulnerability by saying, I don't know, and I hadn't considered that. And you know what? I'm telling you right now, here and in this public space, that's a priority for us. It's got to be your child's health.
Yeah, no, it felt good. And it, I had one or two parents say, first off, before I asked my question, thank you for doing this. You didn't have to do this, And so again, it's uncomfortable. And I don't know if I would have done that my first year. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I feel like you build that confidence and you build that ownership, and ultimately the buck stops with you. And having a supportive board, I mean, as you know, it's all the difference in the world, right? Where they're sitting there, they're on the front seats and they're looking at you. Okay, that's our guy, right? That's our guy, and we're here to support. So that feels really good.
That's great. I'd like to ask you a question that I ask every guest who comes on our program. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate for you? You've touched on it a little bit, but I want to ask you as a formal question.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's learning from your mistakes and being open about it. So what I'm trying to do is cultivate a culture here with my cabinet specifically, where they can literally come in and tell me, John, I have to push back on this, or something you said the other day, really, it's been weighing on me. I've been tossing and turning around this or that. When I feel that, and I feel like we've gotten to that point where I would say 95% of my cabinet has that comfort level to do that, and I feel comfortable in return doing the same. That type of transparent communication and relationship goes a long way, because then you're not having these little pockets of, the meeting after the meeting kind of thing. And I will say, Peter, my first year here, coming from a different place, a big city, I was named Johnny Vegas, and it stung a little bit, because I wanted them to know that I wasn't this slickster big city guy. I really am not. And the actions speak louder than words. So I'm at this point now where it's so okay to be vulnerable, to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to talk to one another. And then when we walk out of the office, we're hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, we're teammates. I really want, those are the kind of people that I want on my team, that are humble and vulnerable like that. It resonates with all the staff and everybody else, and the community then feels more comfortable talking with you.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress. I'm not there yet, but vulnerability, it takes a while to dust off some of that ego.
We are back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader, called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest today is Dr. John Anzalone, Superintendent of the Camas School District in Camas, Washington. Now, in this segment, like every week, we ask our guests to deconstruct the decision that they made, and then what did they learn from it? John, what happened?
Upon me coming to Camas, walking into a budget crisis like many others,
Sure.
I walked into a situation where I felt that there was going to be a potential work stoppage, strike from our teachers. And I think coming in new as a kind of almost like fresh meat, right? Hey, we'll take advantage of this guy coming out of another place. And I look back and I feel like I put so much emphasis on building relationships with the community. It's one of the things that the board hired me to do, whether it was local politicians, our state representatives, our former mayors, just go down the list, right? And I felt I didn't take enough ownership of my calendar. And I look back and I wish that I would have said, hey, this is who I think I need to meet with more. And looking back, I didn't connect well enough with the bargaining team for the teachers specifically, and most importantly, my principals. I felt as though the emphasis on community engagement was very critical, but it shouldn't have been as critical as building the trust with my principal group. And what I did was
Before you don't tell me what you did yet, I do want to hear. I do want to hear.
Okay.
I do want to hear. I do want to hear. But just to reframe what I think I heard you say, and this so resonates. This is exactly something that I did in my first year, where you feel like you've got to build this trust, because if you're going to go for a tax increase or a bond campaign, that like you've got people voting on you, whether they recognize you and trust you, because as a small business owner, they're voting for their, the 33% they may be paying as a business owner, plus the percentage that they're paying on their home. And so like you've got to really, and you want to be able to say, this is the vision I have for our community. And okay, so if I understand correctly, because it's not my issue that I'm working right now, we're talking about your situation. You were a new superintendent. You recognize that there are two systems, the internal system, the external system. And as you were approaching this work, you were, in your words, prioritizing really the external system of your local government, your state government, the business owners, the Chamber of Commerce, and maybe you didn't find that appropriate balance, or the balance that you now looking back wish you had with your internal system of your teachers union and all the other unions and your student voice and principals and those kind of things.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay. I kind of rambled, so I think you could have. And then what I heard you saying is that was what was overlooked. I am interested to know what you did. Yeah. So I want you to go from there. And then I'm going to ask you the question of, what did you learn about relationships as a result of that? Okay. So what'd you do?
Yeah. So it's kind of two-pronged. After going through the strike, I knew that
they did strike.
They did strike.
It was looming as you were entering, and they did strike.
Yeah. And so that was heartbreaking. That was brutal. And coming from another state, it took a toll on myself, my wife, my kids who attend school here. And so I knew right away that my job was going to evolve into a healer for the community. And how was I supposed to do that as this new superintendent? And so one of the things we did with the teachers bargaining group is, and this is a little out of the box and a little scary, was we actually called them in for an after action review with a facilitator, and never been done before. And I told my team that we have to go in there very humble, very vulnerable, and be willing to be open about missteps that we made, and hoping that the bargaining team from the teachers union would take the same approach. And they did. The facilitator really did a great job to dig into the mistakes that were made. We knew that a lot of that was out of both sides' control. It was a little political, but we knew that we had some missteps. One of those being that we didn't set ground rules about the bargaining from the beginning. We didn't have good guidelines. And so social media went rampant, and there was this barrage of negativity around this, and a divide between the district and the teachers and the community were trying to pick sides, and it was awful. And this after action review was very awkward at first, but as the time went by, it was about a 3-hour meeting. Really, people started to put their guard down a little bit and say, yeah, these are things we can do better next bargaining. And we knew it was coming up in 2 short school years. We walked into this bargaining, and we're currently bargaining with them. And Peter, I will tell you, it has been a completely different atmosphere. We've set ground rules. We shared a cast of characters with the community from the beginning. What's the superintendent's role? Who's the lead? What attorney's going to be there on both sides? And believe it or not, both sides' proposals are live on our website. Everything is out in the open, and has completely changed the entire tenor of these meetings. And I'll tell you, we're probably going to end up reaching a deal, knock on wood, way sooner than I thought. And
it was because of, what about at the end of each session? Where you have both taken notes, you share the notes with each other, you sign off on those notes, and then
I call those TAs, like tentative.
Okay.
And so then our communications director will make sure that both sides are good with the notes. And we actually post those online, so we can.
Those are really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can go on our labor management page and see all that. It's really powerful. And I'll tell you, there was some trepidation on the union's part to do that, but it's been working. But the second piece, similarly, was because I didn't invest enough time with my principal group, 13 principals, I made it a point that I wanted to build real trusting relationship, because God forbid we have to go down this road again. And listen, that's paid dividends with our budget reductions. There had to be a trust there. And I wanted to cultivate those relationships. And so I started something called a principals council, where it was not the APs, not the deans. It was just the principals and me. And we meet once a month, and it's operational. It's working through problems together. I facilitate it, and it's amazing. Even the small problems, the medium problems, and even the big problems that we bring to the table, we work on together. So that way, when I do ask them to be at the table for something large or to stand by me on something, they're much more apt to do that because there's a trust there. So just, I guess, looking in the mirror and saying that, there were some missteps, that it was rookie mistakes. Some of it was coming from a much different type of system.
I was going to say contextual, right? I mean, just like
Big
you hadn't
time.
had that experience. Yeah.
Big time. So I hope that helps a little bit for your listeners to say, hey, don't be afraid to admit missteps. None of us are perfect, and come together. And I think that pays dividends over time.
What I think they'll also take away, if the question is, what did you learn about relationships, is just how important it is to invest in them, to take the time, that they don't you can't take them for granted, and that you're going to have to, I mean, in Brene Brown's words, to really be vulnerable with others. And that after action review, the way that you described or painted that 3-hour meeting, sounds like it really set the stage for what then became just a reinforcing loop of community building.
Yeah, it really is. And it continues to be. It's funny because the relationship building was always my strong suit coming up the ranks. And so it's odd for me to admit that I made some relationship missteps. But I look back and I think, well, in CCSD in Las Vegas, I was there from day one as not only a student, but then as a teacher, an administrator, and an assistant superintendent. And so many of us came up together, 10, 15, 20.
So they know your heart. Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden.
And you can't just tell people like, I'm all about kids.
I'm a
Like,
good guy. I'm a good guy. Trust
right.
me. And that was hard. And so I don't envy people, when they come from a long-term system into a different system. It's tough. It's tough. And there's a lot of small town politics and relationships and traditions.
And typically when you're entering a new system, you are granted the time to get a beat on that system. Who are the tribal leaders in this community? Who are the thought leaders whose families run really deep? Who's connected to whom? And it sounds like what you inherited was like, hey, welcome. We're about to go on strike, so buckle up.
Welcome. Go cut 6% of your staff that you don't even know, right? Welcome. You try to negotiate a contract and you don't know any of these people.
Right. And you say, do we have ground rules? No ground rules.
Yeah.
So we're just going to sit in a room and
it's going to happen. Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like a mess.
And it's nothing that the board did wrong. They had an interim for a year. I look back and I'm like, okay, could there have been a hiring of a permanent superintendent a year before?
Oh, it could have been different.
Things like that. And there's never a perfect time. I think if I still would have taken the job, if I had to do it all over again, but knowing what I know now, would have kind of, went a little bit different direction on some things.
Yeah, no, totally. What advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
So understand the time commitment, understand that this job, whether it's a principal job or superintendency, that you are on stage all the time. What you wear, the way you sit, your posture, the way you speak, you have to understand that the higher you go up, and especially in the superintendency, that's who the people want to talk to. They want your attention. They want your ear. So be ready to be on. However, you can balance family and the job. I have so many colleagues of mine that don't want to take that step from assistant principal to principal or assistant superintendent to superintendent because they have young kids or they have some personal things they have to, address. But you can do it. You have to put your family first. And so I always say that my kids are only going to go through 4th grade once or 8th grade once or whatever one time. So try your best to balance, get to their events, get to their programs. Everything else is still going to be there.
And believe it or not, if you've built the right team, they'll pick up in areas and you'll do the same for them.
But exactly, you have to practice what you preach, right? So as much as I want grace from my board and my cabinet to say, John, go be with your daughter, go celebrate this, go be there, I have to do the same. And I enjoy doing that. Hey, John, do you think I could skip out of here 3 hours early? My son has this bubble. Absolutely. Make up the time another time. Keep your phone on. And so that kind of thing, I think that goes a long way, with your team when they see that you're able to give that time to them, but then you're also asking for that time yourself. But it can be done. And I've had I've had people come to me and say, John, thank you for making us understand that you can do it. My wife says all the time, thank you for when you come home having a smile on your face. Thank you for that, because I understand the weight of the job, but I have to try to check it at the door the best I can. And that's a big deal because
Oh, that's fantastic. I was going to make a stupid joke about Botox, but that's done. So thanks for having a smile here. No problem.
yeah,
It's
permanent
permanent.
smile.
Can't help it.
Yeah.
Oh, I did make the joke. Damn. All right.
I love it.
So
I love it.
our guest today, John, thank you so much. Our guest today was John Anzalone, Superintendent of the Camas School District in Camas, Washington. John, I took my takeaway so far. You used the phrase cultivate the culture. And so I started to think about the ways that you clearly have worked to do that. Cultivate the culture that prioritizes relationships. Cultivate the culture that thinks about the experiences that students need so that they'll be successful when they graduate your schools. And prioritizing, whether you call them soft skills or workplace skills, having children understand what's going to be expected of them in the future. Cultivating a culture where the operations team really sees their influence on the system and how students can be successful. So finding ways for kids to give them feedback as well. All of this is just so wonderful. Camas is so lucky to have you. I'm so grateful to have had you on the program today, really, truly. So thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. Thanks, Peter. Great job.
All right, we're back. Peter Stiepleman, do you mind if we start with the profile of a graduate, North Star conversation?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I interviewed someone this morning. I mean, his episode won't run until March. And we were talking about the profile of a graduate, particularly the kind of future skills that one might need to.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. And so as I was sitting down and reminding myself about this conversation, I was like, this is great. This is the kind of conversations we need to be having about not just Carnegie units that people sort of like minutes in seat. And so you get a degree, but rather really thinking about the kinds of skills and experiences one needs to be able, for a district to be able to say, this kid is ready for life or college and career.
What I thought was unique or interesting related to the conversation about a profile of graduate here in Camas School District, we just recently worked in a district where they had a more generalized North Star, something like, all kids doing something after schooling or, happy, future focused, blah, 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 whatever.
I'm just saying the fact that you can't really remember it
is worthless because it's worthless. And then they had a profile of a graduate for the secondary level. And then they had other things for the middle school and the elementary level. Now, were they aligned? I mean, generally in the sense of academics, for sure. What I loved about this was like, no, forget all that. Our North Star is the profile of a graduate. And it's my job to help and figure out how to actually make this clear for pre-K through fifth. And that I really liked. And I really love that
cohesion,
idea.
or we call it alignment. We call it, it really has a clear purpose, sort of a string attached all the way to when a child crosses the stage at graduation of everyone along the way knew what we wanted for you in terms of the opportunities we would provide. And then you would take advantage of them. Profile of a graduate in terms of that.
He said they've even changed their report card language and their progress report language to consistently sort of move the needle toward those 5 characteristics that were a part of their profile of a graduate. And so it became part of the daily language of the elementary school level. And the reason why I'm pulling this part out is that I think we miss on this a lot. The specificity of it.
Yeah. I sometimes say that we have
like one thing.
Sorry. So we sometimes have a bridge that is being built from 2 sides instead of building the bridge and keep it going to make sure everything's connected. And so then when they get to the center, they realize, oh, whoops, we didn't build a bridge that actually connected. They kind of meet now. Should we have a ramp? Do we do stairs? Is there an elevator? How often is it out of order? Really, in my mind, it's when schools work in isolation at their grade spans. Elementary says this is what we want. Middle school says this is what we want. High school says this is what we want. And they haven't done this work all together like they have here. The other thing I would say is superintendents, particularly right now, are faced with significant decisions around budget. And the fact that his district and his team is saying the budget decisions we're going to make need to be aligned to this work around the profile of graduates. So if it's not moving us towards that, then it ought to be considered for reallocation or just readjustment in terms of mission.
Yeah. I mean, that we'll talk about that. I really do want to talk about his after action review
Okay.
because I thought it was super interesting. But I guess I'm pulling this one out particularly because it is unusual. I don't see often that they decide the profile, even the phrase profile of a graduate. I can see how elementary would go, well, I teach pre-K.
Yeah.
Like, how am I aligned here?
Well, I'm
Why-
trying to
why
think
aren't-
back to, we had a guest, and I'm trying to remember who it was, who said that they have the high school graduates go meet with the elementary teacher teams to talk
Yeah.
about what their experience has been, what they were working on, where they're going, so that teachers have an idea of how to talk to younger students about what's coming, as well as how to more appropriately prepare for the kinds of lives that kids are saying are happening right now. So I
Yes.
thought that was kind of interesting. Do you know, when I was superintendent, we did something similar. Now, there are school districts, they call it asset building, or they're looking at ways that as kids graduate, they're able to report to families and even to employers. Like, here are the things that we expect students to have when they leave, not just course completion, but rather skills, attributes, experiences, those types of things. And we were trying to do it also as a school district. I wish I could go back and include student voice more. I didn't. We used teachers, counselors, directors, principals, assistant principals, and what a fail, what a miss we didn't include
Yeah,
students.
tell me why.
No,
So I
just
love
an
this.
oversight. We met early in the morning, and we ought to, and I had a student advisory. Why didn't I bring it to the advisory to get their feedback and thoughts on the kinds of things we thought students would need as they graduate? It was just a miss. I will tell you, though, we never published our results because, as we talked about the kinds of things that students would need and the type of rigorous coursework we would expect them to have, and the opportunities we would want them to avail themselves to, including volunteering and all the kinds of things that we said, if our graduates had this, we know they would be predictably successful.
Right.
Definitely rooted in research on those types of things. And I mean, maybe a third of our students really met that. And we thought, it's not a requirement to do this. This is an exercise for us as we begin to try to build better systems for kids. And so I'm glad that what they're doing is taking it almost a step further and saying, wait, why are we just looking and talking to high school folks? Let's go all the way through the system.
I mean, when he said that they do exit interviews with seniors, I was like, oh, this is
That's who it was. I'm like, who was it that was doing that? It was him. I was like, it was somebody recently. How about the interview you just had with John Anzalone? Oh, yeah.
No, you actually shared a different story that I wanted to come to, which is that students came back to the elementary school the elementary school interviewed those students.
Yes.
But John is doing exit interviews with seniors, and it is literally one of the primary recommendations that we make in my organization to other districts is, if you need a feedback loop with students. And we suggest actually that you do exit interviews with 5th graders, with 8th graders, and with juniors. And we specifically say those grades because you're going to get a better sense of, like, how prepared do they feel for these big steps in their lives. Going from elementary to middle is a big step. Going from middle to high school is a big step. And you run these qualitative interviews, you gather that data, and you can make adjustments. And we say juniors, which is the same as a senior. It's basically like exit interviews to the kid that's exiting, but they have buy-in. The amount of time that we've interviewed seniors, and seniors have been like, I don't care. This place did not work, and it doesn't matter.
I would say, I think it's brilliant to do juniors for that reason, and because there's still time to do something about it.
Yes, exactly.
When kids are saying, like, this is the kind of experience I've had, well, great. Give us the next 9 months, 10 months to prove that we heard you. And then when they become parents in your district, they'll remember fondly, I spoke up and someone listened and they did something about it, or at least they tried.
I don't want to diminish. It takes time and effort. You need to it's going to take you a minute to figure out how do you collect qualitative data that often, and what do you do with it, and how do you synthesize it? But it turns out AI can be helpful in the synthesizing all of this data into themes. And then it's the themes that drive it. And you keep the quotes, and you use this to sort of define the programmatic changes that you're going to make. Back to John, and that is that listening to people is what helped him to make the budget decisions. So that basically had the strategic plan, and that helped him make these difficult budget decisions, which probably leads to his after action review, which I thought was...
Well, that's what I'm going to say. So let's get into his after action review. What were your thoughts?
My main thought was, can I start from end first?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So he ends with crap. I didn't spend enough time with the union. And I thought that was so like, oh, that's so basically terrible. It's just terrible. And what he did was an after action review. He's, well, crap, I got to do this better. I can't do that. That can't be true. That in and of itself, that move right there, even you said, I mean, obviously I'm biased to the phrase of after action review, but the fact that he decided in the moment, I realized this was not the way to do it.
He also had presence of mind to say, I don't need to lead this, or not even that, I shouldn't lead this after action review. A facilitator can allow me to be a part of the conversation. I mean, talk about the power of bringing in someone to help you think that through and do that so that your voice is missing when you're facilitating. It needs to be.
You need to be able to participate.
Right.
And be a part of the community because you are. And that, I mean, I can't get a better plug for our approach to our work. Yeah, you should let me do that. I'll run the protocol. I'll be the one to help you gather the feedback because you should be in it. You should have your opinions matter too. Your ability to listen and not worry about how it's going to go in the next step. That's the purpose of an outside person.
Yes. Yes. And allows him to play the role that he saw that he had to then play as a healer in the community.
That I thought was
what a great phrase. A healer.
I know. So can I ask a question related to this, related to the after action review, and really was just prior to the after action review around budget cuts? And he talked when the mom came and said, what about my diabetic son? What happens then? I really wanted to ask you, Peter, again, back as a former superintendent, when can you say, I don't know, and when can't you?
Yeah. What a great question. I'd say it's situational, right? It's almost like if I've also said, I don't know 5 times already, then you're no longer an imperfect leader. You're an incompetent leader. Right. So,
yeah.
So that depends. I never advise though to make shit up. Don't do that. And sometimes people feel like they just need to talk and say things because they're providing an answer. And that is worse. A, you don't remember what you just said because you were so stressed about saying it. Secondly, what you said was inaccurate. And that's worse than not knowing. It's okay to say, let me get back to you. I don't have that answer right now. Let me get back to you. Let me make sure I talk to the right people and get you an accurate answer. Those things are okay. I do think there's power in saying, I don't know, to say, look, not that you can't expect me to know everything because that sounds defensive. So it is a little bit different. It is to say, allow me to be human. I won't have all the answers. So I don't know is okay. I don't know dished out way too many times is a trust buster.
Right.
That's what I would say. I thought it took great courage. And I know I talk about that in the conversation too. It just takes great courage to say, hadn't considered that.
Right.
Let's think about this differently.
What I hear from you is that, okay, I mean, the answer is situational. Like, yes, I think that's true. That's sort of obvious.
I don't mean that as a cop-out. It's just that, you may have someone who has been coming to the podium over and over and over and over, and I don't know, serves as an accelerant to an already hostile situation.
Right.
Someone who's saying, have you considered this? Or what do you think about it? And to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
That can be a bridge builder. That's why I think it's situational.
Can I make a connection as a coach? All right. So I say this when I'm supporting, especially leaders, but coaches and anybody taking a coaching stance in their leadership. If you're working with someone and they go, fine, yeah, sure. Tell me what to do. What do you think? What do you think I should do? My advice is say nothing. Give them nothing. They are not interested in what you're going to tell them. They are trying to get you to stop talking. And so in that moment, say, thank you for your time. Let's find another time to meet and maybe circle back, something to that order. But if you get someone else that says, I don't know what to do. I'm honestly lost. I feel lost. You give them something right away, because in their tone, having them reflect on what's possible and where it could go, that's only going to get them down the hole. They already feel helpless. So help them. And it's that is the only point at which I say, that's where I say give advice as a coach. There's very few points where I say give advice. And it's in those moments where people are honestly asking, and it's all tone. It is all tone and body language too.
Yeah.
The words are the same.
Oh, sure. I think about that. The body language and where you position yourself. I mean, if you're just face to face, that can be really off-putting and intimidating. And if you're side to side, almost as if you're driving in a car or walking together, there's this openness, the ability to sort of explore and talk. And yeah, I felt that the real difference, not just your facial body language, but your whole body, in terms of how are you sort of almost mirroring the body language that you're having with the person that you're having a conversation, or are you closed off and showing something very different? Yeah. Oh, I love it.
Tools that we use. 100%.
Yeah, I love it.
And I loved when he said, and he does something, I don't know, similar in terms of that actual action, but all of mine are person to person interactions. I'm talking to a person. It's not through email. It's not through a video. I'm talking to a person. And that seemed to be his approach. He's like, challenge,
he says, the relationship building was always my strong suit coming up the ranks. This is his quote. And so it's odd for me to admit it, that I made some real relationship missteps. Oh, yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah. And I know as he moves into subsequent decisions to today, he thinks about this. I mean, anyone who joins our program and walks through a situation, this has been on their mind for some time. It's not one that they're like, I wonder, gosh, what should I talk about? No, it's, you know what? I should really talk about that one. And then they'll go explore some other ones. And then they come back to the one that's really been on their mind for a long time. Because I know
I'll put the caveat, that's true for many.
Yeah. I mean, those who say, I'd like to tell you about a time 30 years ago that I stubbed my toe. What I learned about relationships, toes, everyone's got a toe. You're like,
and people should warn me so I don't stub my toe next.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. That's fair. That's fair.
Most of them. John is a model for this kind of humble leadership and clarity of reflection. You and I are so biased. We're so biased toward this type of leadership. And it's not because we just like it better. It's because we know it works.
That's right. All right. Well, I think what we should do is remind people that they should give us 5 stars, that they should keep subscribing, and remember to let other people know about the program. We continue to grow audiences, and we're just so thrilled that's happening. So you've been listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendent and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepleman.
And I'm Jamie Almanzán.
And we will see you next week. See you, Jamie.
See you next week.